in June 2007, Hamas and Fatah formed a national unity government. It was a very moderate government. It consisted mainly of technocrats rather than politicians, and it called for negotiating with Israel a long-term ceasefire. And long-term was defined as 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, maybe 50 years, long-term ceasefire. Israel refused to negotiate. And then Hamas was forced to preempt the Fatah coup, and it seized power in Gaza. And since then, the two branches of the Palestinian family have been divided and kept by Israel strictly apart, with Hamas ruling over Gaza and the Palestinian Authority ruling over the West Bank from Ramallah. Israel's next move was to impose a blockade on Gaza. A blockade that people forget has been in force for the last 16 years. For the last 16 years, there's been an Israeli blockade of Gaza, which involved incredible hardship for the inhabitants and is illegal. A blockade is a form of collective punishment which is prescribed by international law. Having been denied the fruit of its electoral victory, Hamas resorted to the weapon of the week, to terrorism, and this took the form of rocket attacks from Gaza to southern Israel. Then there was a tit for tat and an escalation of hostilities. In June 2008, Egypt brokered a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The ceasefire worked really well. In the 6 months before June, the average number of rockets that hit Israel was 179. In the following months, the average monthly was 3 rockets. And by launching on the 4th of November 2008, a raid into Gaza, which killed 6 Hamas lawyers, Israel violated the ceasefire and hostilities resumed. Hamas has an impeccable record of observing ceasefires. Every ceasefire brokered by Egypt, every single one has been violated by Israel when it no longer suited it. The first Israeli onslaught on Gaza in 2009 was called Operation Cast Lead. The reason given for it was self-defense, that Israel, like any other country, has the right to defend itself and to defend its citizens. But if all Israel wanted was to protect its citizens, all it had to do was to follow Hamas's good example and observe the ceasefire. This was the first major assault, Israeli assault, on the people of Gaza, and I use the word the people of Gaza deliberately. It involved very heavy casualties and huge damage to the civilian infrastructure. The United Nations Human Rights Council appointed a commission of inquiry headed by the South African judge Richard Goldstone, who happened to be both Jewish and a Zionist. The Goldstone Report was issued. It is a remarkable document. It's 575 pages. It details 33 episodes and war crimes. The report says both sides were guilty of war crimes, but they reserved the severest criticisms for Israel because of the scale of its war crimes. I'll give you just one example. Goldstone and his colleagues found 7 incidents in which Israeli soldiers shot civilians leaving their homes on orders from the IDF holding a white flag. Can you see echoes of today? The conclusion of the report was that the attacks were directed, at least in part, at the people of Gaza as a whole. It was, quote, a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population, unquote. I'll repeat this in case you didn't hear it. It was a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population, unquote. There have been many more Israeli onslaughts on Gaza. In 2012, 2014, 2021, 2022, and 2023. So by my count, this is the 6th serious Israeli onslaught on Gaza. I'm not going to go into any of the subsequent attacks, but I want to say this about the pattern of Israeli behavior. Israeli generals have a phrase, mowing the lawn, which means cutting the grass. It's a chilling metaphor. What it means is that they have no solution to the problem, but every few years the IDF moves in with a lot of weaponry, the most advanced weaponry. They smash up the place, they degrade the military capabilities of Hamas, they inflict severe damage on the civilian infrastructure, and then they go home and leave the problem completely unresolved. And it's a chilling metaphor because it's a mechanical action that you do periodically every few years and with no end. So there is no end to the bloodshed, and the next war is always round the corner. And it's not a policy for dealing with Gaza, it's a non-policy, or rather, it's a military response to the problem. And there is an Israeli saying that if force doesn't work, use more force. But this is an asinine idea. If force doesn't work, it's because it's not an appropriate method for dealing with a political problem. And Israel's disproportionate, excessive use of brute military force ended up by encouraging the rise of Hezbollah in Lebanon and of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The current government formed by Netanyahu at the end of last year is the most radical, the most extreme, and the most incompetent government in Israel's history. The policy guidelines of this government say, quote, the Jewish people have an exclusive and inalienable right to all parts of the land of Israel. In other words, only Jews have a right to the whole land of Israel. Palestinians have no rights. And it's this extreme position which makes bloodshed inevitable, because there is no peaceful way to assert Palestinian rights.